Welcome to Canadian Justice. I'm Christine Van Gyn. Well, Justin Trudeau has announced that he met with the Governor General who agreed to prorogue Parliament. This decision is a controversial one because Justin Trudeau is back on his heels politically. He's announced he will be resigning as Liberal leader, and while the House is prorogued, his party will select a new chief. But NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, who until recently supported the government, has vowed that no matter who the new Liberal leader is, he will vote to bring down the government. Many are saying that this means the government has lost the confidence of Parliament and that prorogation is inappropriate, either legally or politically. And some groups have even announced an intention to legally challenge the prorogation. Can that be done, and what are the implications? Here today to discuss this are two experts, Professors Paul Daly and Philippe Lagasse. Uh, Paul, let me start with the basics. We're using this word that I think we hear, maybe every 7 to 8 years, prorogation. Maybe you can explain what prorogation is, what it does, and what it means.
Very simple. Prorogation brings a session of Parliament to an end, shuts down all business, all legislative business, all committee business, and when Parliament comes back, it's a new session on a blank slate.
So, Philippe, prorogation obviously is not new. It's used to, as Paul said, break up these sessions of Parliament. And it isn't always controversial. In fact, I think it usually isn't controversial. But some people see this case as controversial, either legally or politically. And I explained in that opening why people are taking issue with Justin Trudeau's advice to prorogue this time. Do you have anything to add to why what's making it so controversial this time?
Well, I think the underlying issue here is, as you mentioned, that the opposition parties have indicated that they intend to withdraw confidence. The problem is they said something similar in 2008 when Prime Minister Harper prorogued Parliament in the most controversial case that we have, and then when the Commons resumed, they didn't vote no confidence. So it's one thing to be able to come out and say things publicly as opposition parties, but when you're the governor general and you have to make these kinds of decisions, you can only base yourself on how the House has acted up until that point. And so in this case, it's probably not ideal for a number of reasons we can probably discuss, but I think it is constitutionally above board.
Yeah, Paul, Philippe mentioned that 2008, 2009 prorogation. That I agree. I think that was probably the most controversial recent use of prorogation. Could you tell me? And this was when Stephen Harper was prime minister. Can you tell me a little bit more about what happened in that situation?
Well, there you'd had a recent general election, a conservative minority government led by Mr. Harper. The opposition parties formed an ad hoc coalition. They said they were ready to take the reins, that Mr. Harper should hand over the occupancy of 24 Sussex. And Mr. Harper, to forestall a vote of confidence, a vote of no confidence, went to the Governor General to ask her to prorogue Parliament. Lots of debate and discussion at water coolers around the country about whether the Governor General was bound to accept Mr. Harper's advice to prorogue. Ultimately, she did. And as my colleague Philippe says, when Parliament came back, that coalition had dissipated. It had disappeared into the ether, and Mr. Harper continued to govern happily for the rest of that session.
Now, Philippe, we've only got about a minute left. Would you say that was a more controversial use of prorogation than this one, or about the same or less?
I think so, just because in 2008 you had a situation where, as Paul said, you just had a general election, and that's typically that very close window when you can replace a government with another viable government in the House of Commons. That's not the situation here. In our case, it's either prorogation or dissolution.
Yeah, and I think one of the central questions in sort of both of those cases, the Trudeau prorogation and the Harper prorogation, was whether or not the governor general could have or should have refused the prime minister's advice, the advice in both cases to prorogue Parliament. And there's other historic cases about that exact issue about the governor general declining advice. And I'm really interested in the question of whether or not the governor general has that type of discretion, and how we should, as a country expect that discretion to be exercised. We've got to go to commercial break, but that's sort of what I want to delve into when we come back.